But I also think that the United States is a radical political experiment insofar as it sort of consecrated this commitment to free speech at the highest level. Is it repulsive to me? Yes, which is why I would support a constitutional amendment to have a special carve out for this.
Right.
And if a large enough segment of the American population could get behind this to the point that that constitutional amendment passes, I would be extremely happy to see that happen. Right. But I do think that it's important that speech, even repulsive speech, cannot be banned until that threshold is met.
Well, but even if the threshold is met, Rafa, I do think that if the threshold was met to ban hate speech, then this will stop being a free country. It doesn't matter that the threshold was met for the constitutional amendment. Like a constitutional amendment can't whitewash a bad policy, right?
Welcome back to the City Journal podcast. I'm your host, Charles Fain Lehman, a senior editor at City Journal. Joining me on the panel today are Daniel Martino, Neetu Arnold, and Rafael Mangual, all variously of the Manhattan Institute, immigration, higher education, lower education, all kinds of education. Neetu, really, you do the full spectrum of education.
Yeah, everything.
Everything. Right, it's good. And all things crime, which is related to education.
Sure.
Yeah, they're close.
You're the school and Ralph is the prison and Daniel is the pipeline, I guess.
Education.
Yeah, there's a pipeline in the middle, right?
Immigration and crime and education, it's all related, actually.
It is.
And it's all about merit.
True.
Right. Or it should be. Or it should be.
Some people,
Yeah,
right.
Everything's related.
Some people deserve to go to college and some people deserve to go to prison.
Yeah.
I do like
America versus, I don't know, China or...
I would say nobody really deserves North Korea, but that's me. All right. I want to take us into some of the news. We've been doing a lot on the president's executive orders, but that's because he's been giving us a lot to talk about. Let's jump into earlier this week. President Trump signed new executive orders penalizing states for abandoning cash bail, expanding the use of the National Guard both in D.C. and also gearing up for potential National Guard deployment in Chicago or somewhere else, and also doing something that is sort of like trying to prosecute flag burning, but not really. So I want to talk about all of those, and then maybe we'll have an agreement if we'll disagreement on the flag burning EO. I wrote about this in City Journal, so I obviously have opinions, and I'm curious for the rest of the panels. But let's start, and I'm curious about Ralph's take. Ralph was like, I never get to talk about crime on the show. So Ralph, what do you make of the EOs?
Yeah, I mean, look, the cash bail EOs are interesting, right? Because they're directionally right? Trump is onto something. You have a lot of jurisdictions, particularly in deep blue cities, that are not doing enough to incapacitate pretrial defendants, right? So, for the listeners who aren't really sure how this works, generally speaking, when you're arrested and you're arraigned, you go before a judge, and one of the decisions that they're going to make, in addition to whether or not there's probable cause in your case, is whether or not you're going to be released pretrial. The vast majority of defendants in America get released pretrial. They get released on the recognizance, which means that they just get a court date and they have to come back. But for some defendants who are more dangerous, who are facing more serious charges, right, they might actually end up in jail. And there's really two ways that people end up in jail as pretrial defendants. And one way is that a judge says, well, you're a maniac, so you're staying inside. We're not going to release you because we think you're going to end up killing somebody or hurting somebody or going on a crime spree. And then there are people who are a flight risk, and judges will impose a monetary condition on their release, which means that they will have to put up some amount of money in the form of bail in order to basically buy their freedom during the pretrial period, right? So, we want to make sure you come back. So we want to give you some skin in the game. And so if you don't come back, you lose whatever it is that you were forced to put up by the court. Now, some people will be able to come up with that money. In fact, most people who have bail set will be able to come up with the money to get out. But some people won't be able to come up with it. And so they'll end up in jail just simply by virtue of the fact that they weren't able to come up with the money. Now, a subsection of that population is going to be made up of people who would have committed crimes. And so society benefits from the fact that they're inside and didn't come up with their bail. But some of those people probably wouldn't have committed an offense. And this is where kind of the bail reform debate is kind of kicked off. Now, what I think Trump is right about is that the blue jurisdictions have gone too far, right? Too many people who shouldn't be getting out pretrial are getting out pretrial. Where, I would sort of quibble with how he did it is just, kind of by zeroing in on the cash bail issue. It gives off the impression that the most efficient or the best way to keep the public safe in this context is to just make people pay to get out. Now, here's the thing. If you are an offender who poses a high risk of committing more crimes, the fact that you had to put up some money in order to buy your freedom doesn't necessarily insulate the public from the risk that you pose. And so why center the conversation on the bail aspect, right? What I wish Trump would have done is kind of taken the more nuanced approach, which makes it a little harder to sell. It's not as marketable, right? Cash bail is a very easy term. It kind of rolls off the tongue. But what he really should have zeroed in on was just pretrial detention in general, to say, look, more people need to get locked up, making them pay money and hoping that the dangerous ones aren't able to come up with the money is not a particularly efficient way of going about that.
Can I ask you a question about that, Ralph?
Yeah.
So, years ago, I didn't even know that that's how it worked with bail. And so it's a newer topic for me. But I can see two arguments on this issue. On the one hand, you might say, well, yes, it's not efficient that or fair that it's about money. If you're a flight risk, just keep you in pretrial detention, regardless of how much you can pay, right? So I think that that's a compelling argument. And on the other hand, you can say, actually, yes, actually, the financial side is not only a good incentive to come back, but some people who might be able to come up with the bail money because their family, friends will give it to them, their family and friends wouldn't give it to them if they know that person is not going to show up. So it's a market mechanism. So I can see both sides here. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I mean, I do think that there is a class of offenders for whom you could sufficiently mitigate the risk of flight by having them put some amount of money at risk. I don't think the system has been super great at assessing right where that sweet spot is.
Yep. And we have evidence of that.
Yeah,
looks at does cash bail actually reduce flight risk? And the answer is no.
Yeah,
right.
But I think part of the reason for that is that judges just aren't really good about thinking about what those incentives look like, and sort of calibrating the bail amount to.
We need economics consultants.
Well,
Yeah,
so, I mean, and this gets to something that you've talked about, Ralph, that I've talked about, that I think has been a big theme for us at MI in the Policing Public Safety Initiative, which is like, and my concern about this EO is there are some states that have just gone, cash bail is bad, let's have no bail, and just let a lot of people out. New York,
right.
Illinois, California had this like temporary no bail policy during COVID that measurably increased crime. That's bad. And then the other end, there were states that have done this experiment with what you talk about as algorithmic bail, where the idea is instead of putting up a surety, you have a risk assessment protocol that says, how likely are you to reoffend? How likely are you to be a flight risk based on prior data and what we know about you? And then the judge makes a decision based on that risk assessment tool. These exist in, I think, 2 states, somewhere between that.
I like that.
And those have been fairly effective as like a tool for.
I mean, shouldn't it be obvious that if it's a person that is charged with, say, their second theft offense, that perhaps they should be detained pre-trial? And ideally, I guess the solution to all of this is to be able to have trials also quicker. If you have quicker, less wait, this matters less.
That's a really important structural point, and I'm glad you made it, because one of the things I always try to make sure I say in these discussions is that the only reason that bail reform became a thing was primarily a function of how long people stood to spend in pretrial detention.
How long
And
does
that,
it usually take?
I mean, it can take
varies by
9
jurisdiction.
months, over a
9
year,
months.
for
And
some
is that
cases,
because
2
crime went
years.
up, or because we are underfunding courts? Because this is
we're
getting me back to
underfunding
like my
courts.
immigration
And so-
expertise.
Yeah, this is exactly the right point.
It's because we're underfunding courts, but it's also just that courts have gotten measurably slower, right? There's interesting research on this in the National Center for State Courts, where they find that judges have just forgotten how to expedite their calendars in a way.
I mean, it's almost like
on their lifetime appointments.
Yeah.
Well, in the federal system they are,
right.
right? I mean, in the state system, no. But
Sometimes they're like,
it's almost as if like 30 days has become the default period between hearings. And judges don't even blink at a 60-day period between hearings. And so that's something that absolutely has to change. But yeah, I mean, the amount of time that people are lingering in pretrial detention is largely a function of the resources that the system has to process cases quickly. And if we just invested in the system, we could actually move people through the
Right.
criminal justice process
And
more
save,
quickly.
because sentencing comes quicker, so you save future crimes. So not only do we need like pretrial detention for dangerous people, but we also need to shorten pretrial detention and so funding courts.
For
I think
sure.
that we don't talk enough about that.
I wanna hop in here and get everybody's temperature on the sort of most culturally inflammatory, to deliberately make a pun, component of the EO. And Neetu, I'm curious what your takes on this. I think I have a sense of where Ralph and Daniel are, but one of the EOs was sort of to go after the burning of the flag, except it doesn't really, because the Supreme Court has said that burning the flag as protest is protected by the First Amendment. And so what it actually does is say, you can't burn the flag while involved in some other crime or act of unprotected speech, and if you do, we'll prosecute you. But this has prompted, and indeed, I think there's disagreement among folks at MI about this. Like, our colleague Colin Wright is pretty aggressively pro. I think he's anti-burning flags, but he's pro the right to burn flags, which is a respectable position. I wrote a piece for City Journal saying we need a flag burning amendment. So I think reasonable people disagree about this one, but I'm curious what people make of the broader.
Those two positions are an intention.
Well, maybe, right? Do you favor an amendment is a big question about free
Not
speech.
necessarily intention, because, for example, I'm again, I think alcohol is bad for your health. I don't think alcohol should be prohibited. You know what I mean?
No,
Okay. The unpopular opinion here.
a woman after my own heart. Yeah, I mean, so
But
what do people?
even then, it's different than burning the flag. I think that's more objectively bad. Yeah.
No, so
What do
let
you
me
think?
Just got to say, so my understanding of the Trump executive order on flag desecration, really more broadly, is that he's within the laws, he's within the confines of the law. It sounds like he wants to prioritize prosecutions that involve flag burning. And so to me, that executive order as it stands, I'm fine with that. I think if he were to expand it and just go after all flag burnings, that's where that's a line for me. I've heard various different arguments on this. Sometimes it's about just respect for the country and compelling a sort of respect, which I don't think you can compel that respect. I think it has to be genuine. It has to come from the heart. I think that's how you're going to have true support for this country. I've heard some people say that flag burnings used to be illegal, pre 1989. But to that, I would say that a lot of things used to be illegal. A lot of rights didn't used to exist. Women didn't used to have the right to vote. But just because something wasn't a right previously doesn't mean that it shouldn't be. So that's where I stand.
So look, I mean, I think this is actually a really important point, because what the president's EO, as I read it, does, it doesn't articulate any new stance on prosecuting flag burning per se. What it's saying is that, look, in a lot of cases of flag burning, there are other crimes being committed. For example, I think someone was just arrested and charged recently for burning a flag in protest of this executive order, but they burned it in a park, and you can't set a fire in a park. And so they prosecuted the individual for setting a fire in a park. And so I think what the Trump administration is saying is that, hey, in a lot of these instances, right, we actually do have an opportunity to sanction people who are burning the flag, not for burning the flag, but for the other things that they're doing in violation of the law. Now, I will say, I mean, I'm sure a lawyer is going to make what's called a selective prosecution argument, right? And so, in the law, it is a defense to say that, yes, I committed this crime, but the only reason that they are prosecuting this crime is because, I've engaged in speech that they don't like, for example, and therefore I'm going to raise a First Amendment defense claiming that this is a selective prosecution based on speech. And I think
Jed Rubenfeld made this argument at the Free Press.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a legitimate argument that courts are going to, entertain in the various cases. But I think more importantly, really what this EO comes down to is Trump once again getting Democrats to take the least popular position on what is an 80-20 issue. This is like a skill of his, and he does it every other month. And I don't think the
Yeah.
Dems have learned a lesson. The flag is an incredibly popular symbol. A majority of Americans support prosecuting people who burn the flag and banning flag burning. So he's absolutely on to something. He's illustrating the fact that he's more in touch with the American people than his political opponents, and he's just inviting them to remind Americans of that separation.
My proposal here was, so after Texas v. Johnson, the 1989 case where the Supreme Court says burning the flag in protest is protected by the First Amendment, there are a bunch of efforts to pass a federal flag burning amendment to the flag desecration amendment to the Constitution, which says actually Congress is empowered to prohibit flag desecration. They failed a bunch of times. They couldn't quite get it over the 2/3 threshold in Congress. But my proposal is, okay, if we agree that Texas v. Johnson was right, which I don't necessarily concede, but let's concede that for the purposes of argument, you can still do this. And I would like to see Chuck Schumer take that vote. I would like to know, Ruben Gallego, how's he going to vote on that one when it gets to the Senate? How is Marie Campos going to vote on that one?
In the Biden proposal that just bans it overall without intent? Because Biden had a proposal to get around it, and I actually think would be very dangerous because it means that if you accidentally burn it, that's a crime.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be surprised if that survived scrutiny is the actual answer.
Yeah, I don't think it would survive scrutiny.
Can I ask, why is burning the American flag so important that it requires a constitutional amendment?
Okay, so right, and this I think is the core of the conversation is so there are two answers, right? When we talk about it was banned for a long time, it's like, yes, of course, there were things that were prohibited or legal that should have been illegal, and things that were legal that should have been illegal for a very long time. At the same time, William Rehnquist in his dissent in Texas v. Johnson says, like, it is very hard for me to deviate from the consensus of the people as represented in 48 state legislatures and the Congress who say this is obviously repulsive to us, and we as a moral community have the right to say that. I think that what they are getting at there is that the flag is more than just a particular expression of an idea. It's representative of the nation as a whole, and more relevantly, the set of values that undergirds our liberty. Right? My right to speak freely, my right as an American to speak freely, is undergirded by a concrete constitutional order that the flag stands for. And I think it is fine to say that we should not be able to attack that fundamental set of rights as embodied in the flag.
And I also think our constitutional order fundamentally recognizes the legitimacy of a consensus as large as the consensus that you would need to have to achieve a constitutional amendment.
I'll ask you a question. What if they change the flag? Let's say the United States became a socialist country. They changed the flag and it was red with a big star.
I would not have free speech rights in that country. Like, I'm not sure I see the relevancy.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, I'll tell you one thing. In the Venezuelan protest, I'm from Venezuela, right? We never desecrated the flag. In the opposite, we marched with the flag, right? We didn't march with the flag that the regime changed. They did add an extra star to our flag. They changed it because this is part of authoritarian regimes. But so I don't quite understand why people would want to burn the American flag unless they really didn't even want to live in America, in which case just leave.
I mean, I think
counter argument would be that
I do understand the principle that people should not go to prison for doing something like that. That seems very radical to me.
Well, I mean, the counter argument is that if you are protesting the government, or if you bought your own flag, if you burn it, is that the property of the American government?
Well, technically, dollars are not your property; they're the property of the.
Right, but you can't burn money. You can't destroy a treasury bill.
You
right?
can't destroy a draft card.
You can't. Is it illegal?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
What if someone rips it? Like, I've seen some people draw on dollar bill signs.
Yeah, I mean, technically, you're defacing a treasury bill. That's
illegal. Do that.
So
I mean, the argument.
Okay, that's kind of crazy. It's your money.
The argument in Johnson is the state has a compelling interest in preserving the integrity of the flag, as supported by the fact that basically every state thought they had a compelling interest in it, and again, by it being, it being a symbol
No,
of
I think the legal
liberties.
argument, you're right, Charles. I think that
No,
historically,
look,
it's right.
yeah, I don't think Charles is right about the argument
So you're not.
in
You think
Johnson.
he's not right about
Look,
the legal argument?
You used an interesting word, Daniel. You called it radical. I think that is true, but I also think that the United States is a radical political experiment insofar as it sort of consecrated this commitment to free speech at the highest level. Is it repulsive to me? Yes, which is why I would support a constitutional amendment to have a special carve out for this.
Right.
And if a large enough segment of the American population could get behind this to the point that that constitutional amendment passes, I would be extremely happy to see that happen. Right. But I do think that it's important that speech, even repulsive speech, cannot be banned until that threshold is met.
Well, but even if the threshold is met, Rafa, I do think that if the threshold was met to ban hate speech, then this will stop being a free country. It doesn't matter that the threshold was met for the constitutional amendment.
Sure.
Like a constitutional amendment can't whitewash a bad policy, right?
Sure. Well, I mean, under our constitutional order, it can, right? In the sense,
it can legally. I'm talking
right,
about
legally,
ethics.
but not from a moral philosophical perspective.
Because,
No,
I would
absolutely.
support a right to life amendment. I would support a balanced budget amendment.
Sure.
Because I think those are good policies.
So
I think I'm honestly turned, Charles.
All right. This is a much longer conversation, and we gotta get on to the next topic. So I'm gonna take us out. What was I gonna take us out with? Oh yeah. So let me just ask very concretely. One symbol of dysfunction in DC, just to go back, is Union Station, which is the main train station in DC. This is a yes or no question. Do we believe the administration can durably? We were talking this section before we started, like how durable this stuff is going to be. But here's a symbol. After 30 days is up, can the Trump administration keep Union Station clean? And actually, they just took over governance of it from Amtrak, so that might be longer term. But can they keep Union Station clean? Yes or no? Neetu?
In 30 days?
Yeah.
I think we need to be there longer.
Okay, that's a no. Daniel?
I just came from Union Station like last week, and it was fine. It was great. The
Cool.
National Guard is there. I mean, it's not dirty. Like, I mean, Penn Station is dirty. Maybe my comparison here with New York is bad, but Union Station is great with the National Guard, and I think they're going to keep it fine.
Okay, Ralph?
Yeah, I think the Trump administration can absolutely do it. The question is what happens after the Trump administration.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think that's will it be durable? I'm skeptical. All right, let's talk very briefly, and we're gonna move from crime to immigration a little bit. There's sort of an uproar last week.
Oh, yes.
Actually, I guess earlier this week. It's a little unclear. It seems like basically the president said that he may or may not have said that he wants to admit 600,000 Chinese student visa holders to the U.S. The administration sort of subsequently clarified that this is 2 years worth of visas, which is equivalent to basically the current rate of visas admitted to what?
It's not even 2 years worth of visas. That nobody knows what they're talking about. That's what's happening.
Okay, Daniel, tell us what happened in this debate.
Yeah, Trump said a
Break it
comment
down for the listener.
that he thinks it's a good thing if there are 600,000 Chinese foreign students in America. The actual number of Chinese foreign students in America, including people who are not enrolled in school but working post-school, is 270,000 across all levels, okay? Among those, the only ones who are undergraduates is 87,000. That is less than 0.5% of all the undergraduate students in America. It's nothing, okay? It's totally overblown out of proportion. And the most important thing, 600,000 is not reachable, not because the legal structure isn't there. 600,000 Chinese students could come to America if they wanted to. It's just that there aren't 600,000 Chinese international students who have even applied to come to America. So that's why I think the whole debate is misconstrued. And then you saw like a lot of people who are very native is saying, oh, these students steal the spots of Americans in undergraduate institutions. And they, exaggerate the numbers. They think that there are 600,000 Americans who are not going to college because 600,000 Chinese are. They get the numbers wrong. They get
fixed by, right?
wrong. They get everything wrong.
I've been told there are 100 million illegal immigrants in the United States right
Yeah,
now.
there are 100 million immigrants. The country's population is 500 million. We're being lied to. Do you see people on the street, Charles? Do you even walk?
So I want to get into sort of the there's one bad argument against this, right, which is just sort of like objection to Chinese people qua Chinese people. But I think there's a more interesting split here that I want us to talk about, which is, on the one hand, we have an interest in high skilled immigration. We want people to come here, go to our universities, and then ideally stay here and like contribute to our economy and make us stronger. And on the other hand, like I think basically everyone on the American right and like many people on the American right and some people on the American left agree that the People's Republic of China is our primary like
Yes,
foreign adversary. And I think there are real security risks when it comes with
absolutely.
admitting Chinese students to American universities. So what do we make of that trade-off, right? I think the president is a little unclear, and the president often changes his views day to day on many issues, including immigration. But
Well,
so
on this
what do
issue,
we
he's
make
been
of
very
that
consistent.
bigger conflict? Sorry,
I
Daniel, go
think
ahead.
he's been very consistent on that issue. But I will say that not everybody agrees with you. I do, that there's a trade-off. A lot of people actually say we don't need high-skilled immigration and these people steal the spots of Americans. The reality is that the overwhelming majority of the Chinese students and just foreign students are in graduate programs paying a lot of money that is used to open spots on the undergraduate level for Americans. And there's been many studies on this. And then the question about spying, I think it's totally true. That's why I'm very happy about Secretary Marco Rubio of State that has been vetting finally who is a communist, right? Who participated in CCP activities in China. Some people say we can't trust any Chinese or whatever, but that's ridiculous. There's so many great Chinese Americans, like the children, the amazing American kids who are like competing all of this play in all over the world are the children of these people who came earlier. Like, how do you think we got these great Asian Americans in America? They didn't grow up here. They're the children of
So,
the immigrants who came here.
so there are absolutely costs, right, associated with an expansion of immigration from what is a country that I think is our sort of number one geopolitical foe, right? There's the intelligence threat. There's the influence threat, right? I mean, these are kids that can come and sort of, raise hell on college campuses and push people to the left and promote, a more radical ideology and so discord here in America. But there is also a potential benefit in the opposite direction, which is to say that by exposing some people who have been vetted to the beauty of American life and the freedom associated with, the privilege of living in this country and hoping that they go back and with them take a lower level of tolerance for the kind of oppression that, I think is embodied by the CCP, it could actually be a weapon for us in a way. I mean, what better tool to have in our arsenal than the ability to turn Chinese immigrants against, or temporary Chinese immigrants against the CCP and send them back with not just, the education that they're going to get, but with the power of the experience of living in freedom.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
many
I think
more.
the
Yeah.
trade-off, we can address this trade-off by addressing the contracts that universities are signing with these foreign countries, because there are many students that are coming here, and they're funded by the foreign government, and there are students who are coming here who are paying on their own. I'd be more concerned about Chinese students who are part of a contract from the Chinese government, because then there are usually strings attached to those contracts. They may not be able to say bad things about China, which again, we're not getting the truth as American citizens, as American students. So, there are usually strings attached. They may not be able to say things that are honest about the country. They may have certain obligations to the country. And so I think that's where the real problem is. It's the contract. I think if we address that issue, you wouldn't really have to worry about the visas in the first place.
Can you give an example of this? Because I'm only vaguely familiar with this as a concept, and I think many of our listeners may
Yeah,
not
so
be.
I mean, they're countries like Saudi Arabia, China. They have contracts, like the governments of those countries have contracts with the universities, and they're going to send a certain number of students to the universities. And, we have documented evidence, for example, with the Saudi students,
Yes,
they could not say bad things about the country. If
that is
someone asked
absolutely
them
true.
about it, they could not say it. And so, even like if you're an American student and you want to learn about another country, you want to know what it's like to live there. I think we benefit from having the full knowledge, both the good and the bad. And I think when the students are not allowed to say certain issues, that's a problem. We've also seen the censorship issue with Chinese students. There have been reports about this. They interview the students, usually under confidentiality. And they're saying, they're Chinese, there are other people that are spying on us for the Chinese government. Say, we cannot say critical things.
You saw the recent report that the consulate of the Chinese government in New York City had been sponsoring political activity to influence the mayoral, council member elections, state assembly. I mean, I think we have to understand we're in a new Cold War against China, and the U.S. government needs to take radical steps. And among those, perhaps, is we need to close down the Chinese consulates, and perhaps there only needs to be diplomatic representation in D.C. And we need to go after the spies, which, by the way, they're not all Chinese ethnically or in
Sure. Yeah.
citizenship. Many of them are paid actors from other countries and native-born Americans. And so I
100%.
think there needs to be a lot more focus on the dangers of the Chinese Communist Party. But at the same time, we need to recognize that the reason America overcomes China economically, the reason America is so prosperous is because there are so many intelligent people innovating. And a lot of those people happen to be born in other countries. And if you can steal a really smart person who supports American values from China, that is a win-win for the Chinese people, for the immigrant, and for Americans.
100%. 100%. I think what people are worried about, though, is like, are we stealing talent from China, or are we unwittingly importing a
Yes.
foreign agent?
You end up doing both, right? Like necessarily,
And
because your
with
search is
Saudi,
never going to be
and it's
optimal.
an example. People don't talk enough about Saudi. They're the worst offenders on this whole like government surveillance of their international students here, which are actually paid by the government because it's a free money source for American colleges. Which, by the way, I think people don't appreciate how much American small towns will be devastated if their local college closed down when they're the main employer in dozens of towns. Think about how the steel industry and the coal industry were decimated. This would be a new Rust Belt in America if, these colleges closed down because there's some restriction on foreign students, right? Which are mostly not Chinese. They're Indian, they're Arab, they're Latin American, a lot of European. But there's also these agreements that need to mention with Chinese universities and American universities that I think the U.S. government needs to scrutinize much more. They're not directly with the CCP, but they are with Chinese universities that are state-owned.
Be so upset though if a college is shutting down because they relied so much on foreign students.
Well, it depends on
I
what you
would
mean by so much. I mean, if they lose 1%, let's say this college has 1% of enrollment, and that's the break-even point, and they close down, is that relying so much?
But I mean, I just don't know if that's something that appeals to me in terms of an argument. I mean, what I would care about is, because I think we're also seeing a lot of small towns that are dying, not just because of colleges closing down, just because of a lot of reasons. And you're seeing a lot of migration from small towns to larger cities. So I don't know if that's a good reason to keep around foreign students. But to your point, I agree that they can offer knowledge that we don't have, or they're filling the spots that we're just unable to at this moment. And I also think that we should be having better math and reading education so that citizens of
Sure.
this country are more prepared.
Yeah,
But I
and
don't think
increase
that's
high school graduation rates. Increase high school graduation rates, improve high school so that more people can go to college and be qualified to do it. Sorry, Charles, you want to say
No, I
something?
was going to say I should cut us off there. There's a great deal more that we can go, but I want to be mindful of time. So I'm gonna
Sure.
exercise moderator's privilege and ask. I mean, I think it seems like the consensus is we should issue better Chinese visas. We should issue better visas. We should be more cognizant of the influence that the CCP and other potentially hostile foreign actors exercise over American universities. But so let me ask, in an ideal world, should we be issuing fewer, the same number as, or more visas to Chinese nationals? Just fewer, the same, or more? Daniel, I'll kick it to you.
I think that if my ideal policy was implemented of vetting against communists while allowing anybody who is not a commie to come in, there would probably be fewer Chinese students than there are right now.
Interesting. Okay. Neetu?
I don't really care about the visa issue. I care about the contracts. I think if you address the contracts with the universities, then you address a lot of the issues right there.
Fair. Ralph?
Yeah, I mean, I'd go with fewer. It should never be zero, and the reason for that is that talent, especially at the high level when you're talking about tail ends of a distribution, there's no reason to expect that they're not going to be in other parts of the world, and we shouldn't cut ourselves off from that potential benefit. But at the same time, security's got to be taken seriously. So I think if you do that, like Daniel said, that means the number's going to go down.
All right. Before we go, we gotta do our light item. We have to talk about Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift.
Oh,
we got engaged earlier this
we
week.
have to?
We do. It's obligatory. Our producer Isabel will be very unhappy with me if we don't do that. Yeah. So I want to. I assume everybody heard this news, but Taylor Swift and her NFL boyfriend Travis Kelce are engaged to be married. Some people, here's my question that I'm very interested in, is some have predicted that this will induce a minor marriage and baby boom as millions of Taylor Swift fans follow her lead. Do we think that's going to happen, or is that all hot air? Ralph is very invested in this topic. Ralph, I want to hear your extended opinion. Please start with Taylor's early work.
Wait,
and
you're
move forward.
invested, Ralph?
No, I could care less. I could care less. I think most normal Americans could care less. No, I don't think that it's going to cause a boom in marriage or procreation or anything like that. I mean, it's not as if Taylor Swift doesn't have a sort of ideological like tenor to her, right? I mean, so that I think is already kind of taking care of whatever potential effect it would have had on marriage. It's not like, this is a, person just who's adopting conservative lifestyle. It's just someone marrying another famous person, potentially even just for the sake of publicity, right? Like, I mean, who knows how cynical these people are, whether they're actually in love. But yeah, I don't know. Celebrity gossip culture is just not a world that I ever want to be a part of. It's not one I claim to understand. And if you are looking to people like Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift for cues about how to live your life, let me suggest to you that you have a problem.
Yes.
There are likely much better standards against which you can measure yourself in your immediate life, your parents, your family members, your teachers, your mentors. Start there, end there.
Daniel.
Yes, I don't think we should ever look up to celebrities, Hollywood singers, or really any of that industry generally for examples. They generally are much worse off than the average person in their personal lives, as you can observe. And I'll say, if anything, because the overwhelming majority of fans of Taylor Swift, the stats are it's women, right?
It's Neetu.
If anything, it could actually set a standard that, she got engaged at 35. Like, maybe for them, it's like, oh, then I can wait like Taylor Swift.
Yeah, no, don't do that.
The people who are waiting or getting married, just like Ralph said, because Taylor Swift did, they have bigger problems. But for those people, I think it might even have a negative effect, right? Because they might wait too long.
Neetu, are you more of an optimist? Are you more of a believer than these guys?
Okay, so let me say this. So the day her engagement was announced, my phone was blowing up because I was in several group chats. Some people were super excited, mainly the women. And then some people, it was kind of split. Some men don't really care, and some were like, oh, great. I'm going to have a headache about this now because now we're going to hear about the marriage. And, her album's coming out October 3rd, So, not that I'm endorsed by Taylor Swift, but no, it was just blowing up, and all of us were joking that, we're going to see a baby boom because of the marriage. But I wholeheartedly agree with both Ralph and Daniel that I think if you're making big life decisions based on what celebrities do or don't do, you have a problem. Marriage is a great thing. Having children is a great thing, but I don't think you should be looking to celebrities. And in general, I don't like this whole idea of making celebrities into these idols or as
Right.
role models, because they're people at the end of the day. They make their own decisions. And I don't know. I think placing too much pressure on them is not really good for anyone.
You guys are all cynics. Look, yes, of course people shouldn't, follow what most celebrities do, but they do, right? That's And why do people get married? It's because their peers or perceived peers get married, right?
That
It's
is
all
true.
network effects. It's all who you know with
not out-
community value stuff. What?
It's not out of love.
It's love, but
Related, but people give me a love for a
It's
very long
related.
time.
And we're the cynics.
No. I understand what Charles is saying. I just wish that the peer wasn't this distant person that you have never met in your life and
Sorry.
that you admire because of her songs. I wish your peers were the people around you.
Listeners, we all consider you our peers. We hope that we're influencing you towards
reach out. We have social media. We have events. You can go.
When Daniel gets engaged, we're gonna make it as big as Taylor Swift. That's the
Exactly.
plan. We're gonna blow it up on
and then
CJ.
I will cause a baby boom.
That's the plan. Yes. I encourage all of our listeners, by the way, to go watch Daniel posted a video of him doing the Pete Hegseth RFK fitness challenge that he did for
I
Fox
did.
Latino.
In an impressive time.
It was great.
5 minutes and 40 seconds.
Yes.
I tried it yesterday. It took me 12 minutes and 45 seconds.
I honestly couldn't believe that, Ralph. I think you need to do it again because I'm
almost 40, man.
For you.
All right. On that note, that is about all the time that we have. Thank you, as always, to our panelists. Thank you to our producer, Isabella Regi. Listeners, if you've enjoyed this episode, or even if you haven't, if it's encouraged you to get married, or even if it hasn't, please don't forget to like, subscribe on YouTube and all the other platforms where you listen to us, Spotify, etc. Leave us comments, questions down below. Until next time, you've been listening to the City Journal podcast. We hope you'll join us again.